Baryonyx was not the biggest predator of his time, but he was one of the smartest. While other carnivores fought for meat on land, Baryonyx ruled the rivers. He lived where water met the forest, muddy banks, deep pools, and fallen trees that made perfect hiding spots. His long, narrow jaw looked strange compared to other dinosaurs. It wasn't built for tearing flesh from big prey. It was made for one thing, catching fish. With more than 100 sharp, curved teeth, Baryonyx could grab slippery prey that no other predator could handle. His long claws helped too, especially the massive hook on each hand. That claw wasn't for fighting. It was a tool, a hook for pulling fish out of the water or tearing open nests along the shore. Most dinosaurs hunted under the open sky, but Baryonyx preferred the quiet sound of flowing water. He waited for the right moment, silent, patient, almost like a crocodile. When the fish came close, he would strike in a flash, water exploding around him, teeth closing like a trap. Then just as fast, he disappeared back into the shade. His body was built for this life. He had long legs, strong for walking through mud, and a long tail that helped him swim. Some scientists believe he spent as much time in water as on land. When the sun was too hot, he would slip beneath the surface and stay cool, bubbles rising around his head. When the night came, he followed the rivers deeper into the forest, searching for new pools full of prey. But Baryonyx didn't live alone. Crocodiles, turtles, and early birds shared the same rivers. Sometimes he had to fight for his catch. The snapping crocodile could steal his fish, or even bite at his leg. But the Baryonyx was not an easy opponent. One swing of his arm could send mud and teeth flying. Still, he didn't hunt for war. He hunted for survival, and he knew that patience won more than strength. Every movement was measured. He didn't waste energy chasing what he couldn't catch. He studied the current, the flow of water, the habits of the fish. He was a hunter of rhythm, moving with nature, not against it. When young, Baryonyx learned by watching. He followed older ones along the banks, copying their every step. They showed him how to listen, how to tell the difference between the splash of prey and the ripple of wind. By the time he reached full size, almost 10 meters long, he had become a master of the rivers. His golden eyes watched everything. Above, the forest was alive with noise. Insects, birds, distant calls of herbivores. But the river was his world. It was quiet, slow, and deadly. And in that world, Baryonyx was king. For most predators, hunting meant running, roaring, and showing power. But not for Baryonyx. He didn't need noise to be dangerous. His weapon was silence. Every step he took was careful, every move slow and deliberate. Even his tail swayed gently, helping him keep balance as he moved through the thick mud and shallow water. The forest around the river was alive with sound. Insects buzzing, birds calling, small reptiles scurrying through the ferns. Yet when Baryonyx appeared, the world seemed to hold its breath. Fish froze in place under the surface, sensing a shadow above them. The hunter had come. He lowered his head close to the water, his eyes scanning for the faint shimmer of scales. His nostrils barely touched the surface, enough to breathe without making ripples. He could wait for minutes, motionless, blending with the reflections of branches and clouds. Sometimes only the faint sound of dripping water broke the silence. Then came the strike, a flash of movement, faster than the eye could follow. The water exploded as his jaws snapped shut. One bite, one twist of the neck, and the fish was gone. No struggle, no roar, just efficiency. Baryonyx didn't hunt for glory. He hunted because he had mastered his world. He understood timing, rhythm, and patience better than most other predators. Even larger carnivores like Allosaurus or Ceratosaurus would avoid his rivers, not because they feared his strength, but because they knew they didn't belong there. The river belonged to Baryonyx. Sometimes, though, he left the water. Heavy rains flooded the forest, and streams turned into rushing torrents. That's when he moved inland, walking between giant trees in search of new pools. The ground squelched beneath his claws. He sniffed the air, the smell of wet leaves, of mud, of life everywhere. He found the nests of smaller dinosaurs, filled with eggs unguarded after the storm. He didn't waste the chance. His claws sliced through branches, and within seconds he swallowed what he found. To survive, Baryonyx had to adapt. He wasn't just a fisherman. He was an opportunist. And when the floods ended, he returned to the water, where he was king again. The fish had come back, and with them the quiet life he loved. He knew every corner of the river, every rock, every fallen tree. It was his territory, his world, and he guarded it without sound or warning. You would never hear Baryonyx before you saw him. By the time you realized he was there, it was too late. His eyes watched from the shadows, calm but focused. He didn't chase. He waited. And in the stillness of the river, silence was deadlier than any roar. Baryonyx had hunted these rivers for years. He knew every bend, every hiding spot, every ripple on the surface that could mean prey. But this time, something was different. The fish were gone. The water smelled strange, sharp, muddy, and full of decay. Something big had moved into his world. At first, he didn't see it. He only noticed the silence. Even the birds had stopped calling. The surface of the water was smooth like glass. He stepped forward slowly, one foot sinking into the mud. Then the calm broke. A violent splash, a wave of water, and a dark shape vanished beneath the surface. Baryonyx froze. It wasn't a fish. It was a rival. Another predator, stronger, heavier, and older. A massive prehistoric crocodile, a sarcosuchus. Its eyes glowed yellow just above the waterline. It had come to steal his river. For a moment, neither moved. Two hunters locked eyes, each understanding the other. They weren't enemies by choice, but the river could only feed one king. Baryonyx made the first move. He stomped forward, sending mud flying, and released a low growl. The sarcosuchus didn't retreat. It lunged, jaws snapping shut with a thunderous crack. Water exploded as the two giants clashed. Baryonyx dodged the first attack, swinging his tail for balance. He struck with his claw, hitting the crocodile's snout, but it was like hitting stone. The sarcosuchus turned, opening its mouth wide enough to swallow half his body. Baryonyx backed away, chest heaving, eyes burning. He wasn't built for direct fights. He was built for precision, so he waited. The crocodile lunged again, and this time Baryonyx stepped sideways. The predator's jaw slammed into a log, teeth splintering wood. In that moment, Baryonyx slashed, his claws cutting deep across the crocodile's neck. Blood and water mixed, turning the river red. The sarcosuchus twisted, its massive tail smashing through the reeds. It roared, a deep rumble that shook the air. Baryonyx moved in again, but this time too close. The tail hit him, throwing him against the bank. Pain flashed through his side, but he didn't stop. He pushed himself up, breathing hard. He could end this. He waited for the crocodile to strike again. When it lunged, Baryonyx ducked beneath the water, vanishing completely. Seconds passed. Then from below, a blur of movement. He struck upward, claws tearing into the soft underbelly of his rival. The sarcosuchus thrashed wildly, smashing the water. Then slowly it stopped moving. Baryonyx climbed back to the surface, chest rising and falling. The river was still again. The silence had returned, but it was his silence. He had defended his kingdom. He watched as the body of the crocodile drifted away downstream. Nature had no mercy, no celebration. The strong survived. The weak became part of the river. And now the hunter stood alone again. The king of the waters had no crown, only the scars to prove he had earned his place. The river was quiet again. The fight was over, and the old crocodile had drifted far downstream. But life never stopped here. The sound of insects returned. Fish began to move again, and birds called from the trees. Baryonyx stood still, his reflection broken by gentle ripples. Behind him, smaller footsteps followed. It was a young Baryonyx, thin, clumsy, still learning. Its scales were lighter, its movements uncertain. Every few steps it stumbled or splashed too loudly, making the fish scatter. The older one turned his head, eyes narrowing. He didn't roar or move, just watched. This was a lesson. The young one froze, then tried again. It stepped softer, lowering its body close to the water. Its tail balanced perfectly this time. It waited just as it had seen the adult do. The current moved gently, and soon a flash of silver appeared beneath the surface. The young Baryonyx struck, fast but too early. The water exploded and the fish escaped. The adult finally moved, slow and calm. He walked beside the young one and lowered his jaw to the same spot. Both waited. Seconds felt like minutes. Then with one smooth motion, the adult's jaws snapped shut. Perfect strike. He lifted the fish, dripping and wriggling, and dropped it near the young one's feet. The message was clear, patience. The young Baryonyx tilted its head, studying the catch. It tried again, mimicking the older one's stance. This time it waited longer, focused on the flow of the water, on every vibration. Then it struck and caught one. A small fish, but enough. The adult turned away, satisfied. They moved together through the shallows, side by side. The river was their school, and every step was a lesson. How to listen, how to wait, how to survive. As the sun began to fall, the sky turned orange and red. The two hunters found a spot near the reeds. The young one practiced again. Not for food, but for skill. He flicked his claw through the water, slashing at shadows. Every move became more precise. Suddenly, the older Baryonyx lifted his head. Something in the forest, a sound. The young one froze. A herd of small herbivores, Hypsilophodon, appeared at the edge of the trees. Quick, nervous, but unaware of the danger. The old Baryonyx crouched low, motioning the young one to stay behind. He moved like the river itself, quiet, smooth, and slow. He didn't plan to attack the adults. He targeted a single weak one at the edge. Then with explosive power, he lunged from the reeds. The herd scattered in panic, but one stumbled. The young one followed instinct, charging forward, jaws open. The chase was short. The young hunter caught the small dinosaur by the tail. It wasn't graceful, but it was a start. The older one joined in, finishing the hunt with one strong bite. They stood together over the fallen prey. No celebration, just breathing, steady and calm. The lesson was over. That night, under a bright moon, they rested near the water. The river glowed silver, reflecting the light. The older Baryonyx closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the flow. The young one slept beside him, head resting on his tail. The river would teach the rest. The river had changed. Years had passed, and the water no longer ran as clear as before. Trees had fallen. The current was slower and the fish fewer. But the old Baryonyx still ruled here. His scars told the story of every battle, every storm, and every dry season he had survived. He was slower now, his legs heavier, his eyes dimmer, but his instincts were sharp as ever. He stood near the same shallow bank where he had once taught his offspring to hunt. The air was thick with heat. He waited, watching the surface for the familiar shimmer of fish. When he finally struck, his jaws met only ripples. He grunted quietly, more in memory than in frustration. A noise broke the calm, heavy steps on wet ground. Another Baryonyx had come, taller, younger, stronger. Its scales darker, its teeth cleaner, its eyes full of challenge. The young intruder let out a low growl, deep and steady. It wasn't here to learn, it was here to take. The old Baryonyx raised his head. He didn't move at first. He simply stared, calm, unshaken. For a moment it was silence again, like the stillness before a storm. Then the young one charged. Mud and water exploded as the two predators collided. The impact echoed across the river. Teeth met claws, tail swung, waves crashed against the banks. The old one pushed back, his muscles still strong, his reflexes trained by years of survival. But the younger Baryonyx was faster. He slashed across the old one's shoulder, leaving a deep wound. The older predator roared, not in fear but in defiance. He struck back with precision, his claws cutting through the young one's snout. Blood splashed into the water, spreading in red circles. For a brief moment, both stood still, chest heaving, water dripping from their jaws. Then came the second charge. The young one lunged again, trying to pin the elder down. They crashed into the shallows, rolling, biting, clawing. Each second felt like an eternity. The old Baryonyx pushed with all his strength, forcing the young one back toward the deeper part of the river. And then he used the water. He plunged forward, biting the young one's neck and dragging him under. The surface erupted in foam and thrashing tails. But the young one fought back, twisting and slamming his tail against the current. The river boiled with struggle. Two shadows locked in a final test of dominance. Minutes passed, then only ripples remained. The young one rose first. He gasped for air, bleeding, exhausted, but still standing. The old Baryonyx lifted his head slowly behind him. His breathing was heavy, but his eyes still burned with the same fire that had ruled this place for years. He took one last step forward, not an attack, but a warning. The young one froze. Then slowly it turned and walked away downstream. There was no roar, no chase, no victory cry. Only quiet. The old Baryonyx stood alone once more. He limped back to the shallows, blood mixing with the water. The fight was over. He had defended his river again. But this time he knew it might be the last time. He looked out across the fading light of the day. The sun dipped low, painting the surface gold and red. Fish moved again, tiny ripples crossing the reflection. He lowered his head, drinking slowly, watching the water flow past his claws. In the distance, a young shape, maybe his offspring, and waited near the opposite shore, practicing hunting in silence. The old Baryonyx blinked, almost smiling in his own way. The river would go on. The next generation would remember. He turned his head toward the sunset, the light outlining his scars and shape. Then he stepped deeper into the river, where the current wrapped around him like an old friend. The water shimmered, and the hunter disappeared beneath the surface, one with the world he had ruled all his life. The river was silent again, but the legend of the quiet hunter would never fade.